Welcome back to Business Matters. I now have the pleasure of welcoming to Business Matters Steve Ziegler of Star Custom Framers, the wonderful owner of this wonderful frame shop in Stowe. Welcome, Steve, to Business Matters.
Well,
Thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. And tell me a little bit about your background and how you got involved in framing.
I started out having the great fortune of living outside of three great cities. I grew up outside of Chicago, and then in my 20s and 30s I worked in Manhattan. And for the last 27 years we've lived in Marlborough in the great state of Massachusetts. So I feel very blessed to be in cities that have a vibrant art and music scene, and it's been very interesting in that regard. Growing up in Chicago, we had the Chicago Art Museum, and I was always there a couple times a year. So from a very early age, I appreciated art and literature, especially music, and that kind of made it a natural transition when I ended up starting my second life.
So you started your framing business later in your career, and how did that come about?
I had a very nice 30-year career in the footwear industry. The first 15 of which I worked for a very large corporation, Kinney Shoes, which no longer exists, but they were the parent company of the Foot Locker chain. At that time, they were owned by Woolworth. And from there, I moved to a small family business in South Boston. It's a brand called Sporto. And I did all their design work and line building and sourcing for them. I moved from there after about 7 or 8 years. Still in Massachusetts, I repped factories out of Thailand and China, calling on people like Bass and JCPenney's and what have you, and doing design work still, as well as sales. Then the company decided that they wanted to concentrate on Europe instead of the States, so they ceased their US operation. I volunteered to go to Europe, but that didn't pan out. So I started looking around, and having worked for an overseas company and a big company and a small family company, I thought it'd be time to try working for myself. So I started looking at possibilities there. I started off looking at franchises, and that's how I kind of bumped into a framing shop. And it seemed to have all the elements I like, certainly the art and design, working with colors and textures and what have you. I have a long background in retail and wholesale, so the only thing I was lacking was actually knowing how to picture frame.
Interesting.
So I took the idea to my accountant, and he said, well, you can do this, but if you do, I won't be your accountant anymore. And I said, what? And he said, once you pay your franchise dues every month, you're not going to have any profit left over. And I'm so glad he warned me of that, because that certainly probably would have been the case. So then I kind of looked around a little bit more and stumbled across a store that had only been open for a year and a half. It was in the western suburbs, and I was in the western suburbs, so it seemed like a good fit. I visited the owner. She'd only been in it for about 16, 17 months and was not doing much and looking to change. So I ended up buying her shop, and it was really nice from the standpoint that all the equipment was already there. So there was nothing I had to add in that regard. I could just pick it up, turnkey operation, and run with it. So just had to go learn how to frame, which I did. The industry, the picture framing industry, has a great organization, Professional Picture Framers of America. And twice a year they hold big trade shows. And in addition to all the booths that they set up, the various vendors, the real emphasis on education. And there are dozens of different classes you can take on shadow boxes and working with textiles and conservation. And so I attended the first quite a few trade shows and mostly took classes. And then I was fortunate enough also to hire some very good people to work with me.
So you really trained on the ground. I mean, just, you know, right there.
Well, in the beginning, she, the woman who had owned the store had a young man working for her who actually, she hardly ever showed up. So he was pretty much running the shop. And I got him to agree to stay for a year. So that helped my transition. And then he's wanting to leave anyhow. He wanted to go to California. So he took off to California, and I hired the first of several women, all of them artists actually, that have worked with me in the shop. And with the mentality the artists bring, I think that with my business acumen, it's a nice combination.
You have to combine that.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And tell me, getting your business off the ground, how has the chamber been involved with that? How has that been helpful?
The chamber has probably been the most essential thing to making it possible for me to be here today.
Wow.
I tried all kinds of avenues. Advertising in big newspapers is very expensive, and the return on the investment just isn't there. Smaller papers like the Stowe Independent are a good place to, because that's your neighborhood, more or less. But the only thing I've found that really works and really, I can say, pays dividends is joining the chamber, but more importantly, being active in the chamber, going to as many events as you can, meeting as many people as you can, saying, hey, I'm here. And especially if you join a committee or you get to work with some other people, because then you get to know them on a deeper level, and they wouldn't dare take their framing anywhere else. So.
Right, right. It's those connections, and it's that level of loyalty, really.
Yeah, yeah. And
Isn't it?
familiarity, and more than
Yeah.
anything, I think all our businesses probably operate, and trust is a key factor. Certainly with what I'm doing, people are bringing in their most prized possessions, and they're entrusting us with them. So it's a big responsibility, but we live up to it and look forward to it. And once you've met these people on your first name basis, as you do through the chamber, that makes that process much easier.
It's all about that personal connection.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. Yeah. And then offering that quality service that I know you're known for. That's great. Great. So tell me a little bit about what aspects of the business do you enjoy the most?
I really enjoy almost all of it. I've been involved with retail and wholesale for a number of years, and I like that. I like running my own shop and organizing things and all of that. I love art. We have just great customers that come in, and if you work at it a little in the conversation, there's a story behind everything they bring in, or they wouldn't be bringing it into you, and it's just fascinating to hear all the different stories. So that part I've really liked. Always loved art. So
It's the backstory to all those pieces of art, whether you're at the Chicago Museum of Art or whether you're at Star Custom Framers. Everything has that backstory that really brings it to life.
it does, and you
Yeah.
can see why they feel so special about it, and you honor that by doing
Such
the
a
best job you
connection
can.
to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. I know that part of your business, you advertise yourself as conservation and preservation services. Now, does that differentiate you from other shops? What does that actually mean?
Well, conservation and preservation basically means when we learned how to frame, that one of the first things they teach us is we have in the framing industry the same motto that they have in the health industry, which is first, do no harm. And so whenever we approach a piece of art or photograph or object, whatever it might be, textiles, we do a lot of textiles, we have to consider, okay, how are we going to do this? And how do we do it in the manner that is the most gentle to the piece? What you learn with conservation framing is what is not good for your piece and what actually is gentle on your piece. So ideally, you could have something all framed up, taken apart, and no one would ever know that it was in a frame in the first place. That's the ideal. So it teaches you a respect for the art, and there's a lot of science involved as far as everything we have is acid-free mats. We use linen for all our hinging because it's acid-free naturally. And conservation glass is a very key element in it as well. So when a store says that they do conservation or preservation framing, what they're really saying is that they study and they keep up on the study of what's most current science on what is good for art and what isn't good for art.
That's great. That really is a differentiator. Tell me a little bit about what else sets your shop apart from some other frame shops.
Well, we have a lot of slogans that we like to use. One of the ones we use a lot is that we specialize in quality, service, and design. And we live up to that. We're really serious. That's not just an empty slogan. And I think a lot of stores out there, a lot of frame shops probably have a decent quality. A lot of them do practice conservation, though certainly not all of them, and some to different degrees. So that's something that you could find. The other thing is service. I know a lot of stores have good customer service. They're pleasant to work with and what have you, and as are we, and we back that up with an unconditional guarantee of your satisfaction. No questions asked. If you're not happy with it, we'll do it over for you. Fortunately, we haven't had to do that too often, but when tested, we definitely do. So we have that in common with other quality and service, but where I think what really sets us apart is the design element. I have artists who work with me. We're all mature individuals, and we've been around the block a few times, as it were. And we can give the customer a very pleasant experience. Oftentimes when they come into the shop, they're a little intimidated. There's all these frames all around them, and they don't really know where to start, and they may not be able to visualize things. So we're all trained to work with them very politely, make it fun, and as unintimidating as possible in experience. So with them all being artists and with my design background, I think that we do something maybe a little special, a little extra special. To that end, we have a small art gallery which features local artists. We love to sell the art, but most of the reason those are up there is because they are good examples of the work we do, that we know what we're doing, different design elements. Also, it just shows them the number of choices they have with frames and mats, fillets, glass, what have you. So all the time when we have a customer in, we're referring to something on the wall, and it's easier for them to visualize then how that might look on their own piece.
It's really, framing is an art in itself.
Yeah,
and it's
I like to think
enhance the art or the art object as well. So I mean, it really goes hand in hand. You know, you can see the same piece treated in many different ways, and what a difference the final impact is. Yeah. Change the subject quickly. How does your involvement in the Chamber, how has that impacted your partnering with other businesses in the community?
Well, first of all, you get to meet one another. So if there are any synergies there, you can take advantage of them. But when I was thinking over that question, you know, it was kind of, well, what am I going to say? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, of course. For me personally, my experience in the Chamber has a group, as you well know, the Business Builders. And what that is, for those who don't know, is it's kind of like a think tank. I like to call it our own personal board of directors. It's limited by industry, so they can only be one picture framer, or one realtor, what have you. This enables us to be totally honest with one another at our meetings and really, you know, just spill out any problems we might have and what ideas do we have and how to handle this. And a good part of our meetings every week is helping one another on whatever little question of the moment they have in their business. And it's really not only been very helpful for the business, but it's formed just really wonderful personal relationships.
Tremendous
as well.
Loyalty too. Yeah. Yes, wonderful. Yeah, very, very special group. And lastly, what advice would you give prospective customers who want to come and get something framed?
Well, I think it's important that they have the professional picture framers sticker on their window. It shows that they care enough. It shows that they seek out other opinions on how to get things done. I just think if you're going to be a professional, you should be in that trade group as well. The other thing I would probably recommend, and customers don't always understand this, but if you have to sacrifice a little in the frame you pick out, maybe not do quite as intricate a mat design as you wanted to do, don't scrimp on the glass. It's really the most important preservation piece of it all. It stops it from fading away in front of your very eyes. So get good glass and then work from there when you're detailing the piece.
Such words of wisdom. Thanks so much, Steve. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for being with us at Business Matters.
Oh, it's been my great privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so thank you so much for watching, and please stay with us for our next segment.